spoon and pressing it down hard on the beets.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You are now entering the Matilda Cafe. In the Matilda Cafe, we have one thing on the menu today, and that is chocolate cake. I would like you to come in, find a seat anywhere you'd like, and wait until the menu is handed out. I hope you enjoy. On the menu, we only have chocolate cake. I'm going to ask that you refrain from eating the chocolate cake until we hear in the menu that our character is eating the chocolate cake. I hope you enjoy. I know that it's going to smell delicious. We just saw how the chocolate cake was made. However, when it's in front of you, try your hardest to show that self-control. And you can take your first bite when the character in our book takes his first bite. Your chocolate cake? Your chocolate cake? Your chocolate cake? Your chocolate cake? Cook! The trench bolt
Your chocolate cake, sir.
head towards the door.
Come here, cook! Bob Trotter wishes to tell you how good your chocolate cake is!
The cook, a tall, shriveled female who was looking as though her body juices has been dried up for a long time in the hot oven, walked out onto the platform wearing a dirty white apron. Her entrance had clearly been arranged beforehand by the headmistress. "Now then, Bob Trotter!" the trench bull boomed.
Tell the cook what you think of her chocolate cake!
"Very good," the boy mumbled. You could see he was now beginning to wonder what this was all leading up to. The only thing he knew for certain was that the law forbade the trench bull to hit him with a riding crop that she was having against her leg. That was some comfort, but not much, because the trench bull was totally unpredictable. One never knew what she was going to do next. "There you are, cook," the trench bull cried. "Bob Trotter likes your cake. He adores your cake. Do you have any more of your cake you could give him?" "I do indeed," the cook said. She seemed to have learned her lines by heart. "Then go get it, and bring a knife to cut it with." The cook disappeared. Almost at once, she was back again, staggering under the weight of an enormous round chocolate cake on a china platter. The cake was fully 18 inches in diameter, and it was covered with dark brown chocolate icing. "Put it on the table," the trench bull said. There was a small table center stage with a chair behind it. The cook placed the cake carefully on the table. "Sit down, Bob Trotter," the trench bull said. "Sit there." "There you are, Bob Trotter," the trench bull said, and once again her voice became soft, persuasive, even gentle. "It's all for you, every bite of it. As you enjoyed that slice you had yesterday so very often, so very much, I ordered the cook to bake an extra large one all for yourself." "Well, thank you," the boy said. "Thank the cook, not me," the trench bull said. "Thank you, cook," the boy said. The cook stood there like a shriveled bootlace, tight-lipped, implacable, disapproving. She looked as though her mouth was full of lemon juice. "Come on, then," the trench bull said. "Why don't you cut yourself a nice thick slice and try it?" "What, now?" the boy said, cautious. He knew there was a catch in this somewhere, but he wasn't sure where. "I can't just take it home instead?" He asked. "That would be impolite," said the trench bull. "You must show Cookie over here how grateful you are with all the trouble she's taken." The boy picked up the knife and was about to cut into the cake when he stopped. He stared at it. He looked up at the trench ball, then at the tall, stringy cook with her lemon juice mouth. All the children in the hall were watching tensely, waiting for something to happen. They felt certain it must. The trench bull was not a person who would give someone a whole chocolate cake to eat just out of kindness. Many were guessing that it had been filled with pepper or castor oil or some other foul-tasting substance that would make the boy violently sick. It might even be arsenic, and he would be dead in 10 seconds flat. Or perhaps it was a booby-trapped cake that the whole thing would blow up the moment he cut it, taking Bruce Bogtrotter with him. No one in the school put it past the trench bull to do any of these things. I don't want to eat it, said the boy. Taste it, you little brat, the trench bull said. You're insulting the cook! Very gingerly, the boy began to cut a thin slice of the vast cake. Then he leveled the slice out. Then he put down the knife and took the stickly thing in his fingers and slowly started to eat it. Is it good? Very good, the boy said, chewing and swallowing. He finished the slice. Have another, said the trench bull. That's enough for me, thank you, the boy said. I said have another. Eat another slice, do as you are told. I don't want another slice, said the boy. Suddenly the trench bull exploded. Eat, she said, banging her thigh with the riding crop. If I tell you to eat, you will eat. You wanted cake, you stole cake, and now you've got cake. What's more, you're going to eat it. You do not leave this platform, and nobody leaves this hall until you have all eaten the entire cake that is sitting there in front of you. Do I make myself clear, Bog Trotter? The boy looked at the trench bull, then looked down at the enormous cake. Eat, 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 the trench bull was yelling. Very slowly, the boy cut himself another slice and began to eat it. Matilda was fascinated. Do you think he can do it? She whispered to Lavender. No, Lavender whispered back. That's impossible. He'd be sick before he was halfway through. The boy kept going. When he had finished the second slice, he looked at the trench bull, hesitating. Eat, she shouted. Greedy little thieves who like to eat cake must have cake. Eat faster, boy, eat faster. We don't want to be here all day, and don't stop like you're doing now. Next time you stop before it's finished, you'll go straight into the tukey. I shall lock the door and throw away the key. The boy cut a third slice and started eating it. He finished this one quicker than the other two, and when he was done, he immediately picked up the knife and cut the next slice. In some peculiar way, he seemed to be getting into his stride. Matilda, watching closely, saw no signs of distress in the boy yet. If anything, he seemed to be gathering confidence as he went along. He's doing well, she whispered to Lavender. He'll be sick soon, Lavender whispered back. It's going to be horrid. When Bruce Bogtrotter had eaten his way through half of the enormous cake, he paused for just a couple of seconds and took several deep breaths. The trench bull stood with hands on her hips, glaring at him. Get on with it, she shouted. Eat it up! Suddenly, the boy let out a gigantic belch that rolled around the assembly hall like thunder. Many of the audience began to giggle. Silence! Shouted the trench bull. The boy cut himself another thick slice and started eating it fast. There were still no signs of flagging or giving up. He certainly did not look as though he was about to stop and cry out, I can't eat any more. I'm going to be sick. He was still in there running. And now a subtle change was coming over the 250 watching children in the audience. Earlier on, they had sensed an impending disaster. They had prepared themselves for an unpleasant scene in which the wretched boy, stuffed to his gills with chocolate cake, would have to surrender and beg for mercy, and then he would have to be watched. Then we would have to watch the triumphant Trenchbull forcing more and still more cake into the mouth of the gasping boy. Not a bit of it. Bruce Bogtrotter was 3/4 of the way through and still going strong. One sensed that he was almost beginning to enjoy himself. He had a mountain to climb, and he was jolly well going to reach the top or die in the attempt. What is more, he had now become very conscious of his audience and of how they were all silently rooting for him. This was nothing less than a battle between him and the mighty Trenchbull. Suddenly, someone shouted, "Come on, Bruce! You can make it!" The Trenchbull wheeled around and yelled, "Silence!" The audience watched intently. They were thoroughly caught up in the contest. They were longing to start cheering, but they didn't dare. "I think he's going to make it," Matilda said. "I think so too," Lavender whispered back. "I wouldn't have believed anyone in the world could eat an entire cake that size." "Trenchbull doesn't believe it either," Matilda whispered back. "Look at her. She's turning redder and redder. She's going to kill him if he wins." The boy was slowing down now. There was no doubt about that, but he kept pushing the stuff into his mouth with the dogged perseverance of a long-distance runner who has sighted the finish line and knows he must keep going. As the very last mouthful disappeared, a tremendous cheer rose up from the audience, and children were leaping onto the chairs and yelling and clapping and shouting, "Well done, Bruce! Good for you, Bruce! You've won the gold medal, Brucey!" The Trenchbull stood motionless on the platform. Her great horsey face had turned the color of molten lava, and her eyes were glittering with fury. She glared at Bruce Bogtrotter, who was sitting on his chair like some huge overstuffed grub, unable to move or speak. A fine sweat was beading on his forehead, but there was no grin on his face. Suddenly, the Trenchbull lunged forward and grabbed the large, empty china platter on which the cake had rested. She raised it high in the air and brought it down with a crash right on top of Bruce Bogtrotter's head, and pieces flew all over the platform. The boy was now so full of cake, he was like a sack full of wet cement, and you couldn't have hurt him with a sledgehammer. He simply shook his head a few times and went on grinning. "Go to blazes!" screamed the Trenchbull, and she marched off the platform, followed closely by the cook. All right. Now what I want you to do, since I'm looking around and everybody has eaten all of their chocolate cake, you can talk with your friends. What made this different for you when you were eating the chocolate cake and listening to someone else eat chocolate cake? Was it different? And if it was, tell me how. You're going to talk with your friends.
We didn't have it, and our headmistress wasn't and we didn't have a headmistress.
Our teacher didn't break something over our head.
You already said that.
I know. But if I was a mistress,
Anything else?